When the last light of the day has faded and the world settles into the deep quiet of the night, have you ever found yourself gazing into the darkness and wondering about the stories that time itself has forgotten? The history we are taught is often a loud symphony of kings, battles, and empires. But beneath that powerful score, there are countless forgotten whispers, unsolved mysteries, and pages that were torn from the book. Welcome back to the Bedtime Historian. This is the place where we do not simply read history, we listen to what it has to say in the silence. Now find a comfortable place, dim the lights, and join me on tonight's journey into the realm of memory.
In the silent, vast expanse of the cosmos, a single planet, cloaked in swirls of blue and white, journeys through the dark. It is our home, Earth, and upon this world, a grand story has been written, the story of us. It is a familiar tale, one we have been told in classrooms, museums, and the hallowed pages of textbooks. It's a story that begins, we are told, on the sun-scorched savannas of Africa, in a time almost beyond imagining. The story unfolds like this. Several million years ago, our earliest ancestors, the first hominins, rose from 4 limbs to stand. Upon 2, this was a revolutionary act, freeing the hands to grasp, to carry, and eventually to create. Over the immense timescale of hundreds of thousands of years, driven by the relentless pressures of natural selection, their brains began to grow in complexity. They learned to fashion crude tools from stone, to tame fire for warmth and protection. They were Homo habilis, the handyman. They were followed by Homo erectus, the upright man, the first great explorers who bravely ventured out of Africa to populate the vast continents of Asia and Europe. The grand symphony of evolution continued. The Neanderthals emerged, robust and intelligent, masters of survival in the brutal cold of the Ice Age. And then, finally, around 300,000 years ago, in a corner of Africa, our own species, Homo sapiens, the wise man, took the stage. With a more sophisticated brain, a capacity for complex language, and the power of abstract thought, we possessed a decisive advantage. We created art that danced on cave walls, music that echoed through the wilderness, and rituals that spoke of a burgeoning awareness of the worlds beyond the visible. We outlasted our competitors, survived cataclysmic climate shifts, and spread inexorably across every continent and island on the planet. Around 12,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution ignited, and we learned to cultivate the land and domesticate animals. The first villages were born, which grew into cities, which blossomed into the great civilizations of antiquity: Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and China. Written history began, and the narrative of our species seemed to be set in stone. It was a clear, linear progression, a slow but steady march from the darkness of the cave to the glittering lights of the skyscraper. It is a beautiful story. It is logical, elegant, and supported by a mountain of fossil and archaeological evidence. It forms the very bedrock of our understanding of who we are. But for a moment, let us imagine a different scene. Imagine you are a geologist working a quiet quarry in a remote mountain range. Your life's work is to read the planet's history in its layers of stone, to understand the passage of eons through the slow accumulation of sediment. One day, while examining a solid slab of limestone dated to the Carboniferous period, some 300 million years old, your hammer splits the rock along a natural fissure, and inside, something is revealed. It is not the fossil of a fern or an ancient amphibian. It is a small, golden chain, intricately wrought, the work of a skilled artisan. It is embedded entirely within the rock, meaning it had to have been there. when the limestone was still just sediment on an ancient seabed 300 million years ago. Your rational mind screams that this is impossible. Everything you have ever learned, every book you have ever read, confirms that no humans, nor any creature capable of smelting or crafting jewelry, existed at that time. You carefully extract the specimen, document the location, take photographs, and bring it to your university laboratory. At first, there is a buzz of excitement. Colleagues gather around, marveling at the anomaly. But the excitement soon cools, replaced by a firm skepticism. It must be an intrusion, they say. A lost piece of jewelry from a much later time that somehow found its way into an old crack in the rock. But you know the rock was solid, with no fissures leading to the surface. Perhaps, another suggests, it is a strange natural formation, a freak of mineral crystallization that merely resembles a chain. But a closer look reveals the unmistakable signs of craftsmanship. Finally, a senior professor, a man whose work forms a pillar of the field, places a gentle hand on your shoulder. "Look," he says kindly, "this is a fascinating curiosity, but it's too anomalous. To publish this would be career suicide. It would make us the laughingstock of the entire scientific community. There must be a simple explanation we're missing. It's best to put this aside and focus on more promising research." And so, the 300 million year old chain is labeled, placed in a small box, and filed away in a dusty drawer in the museum's vast archives, forgotten. Your paper is never published. Your career is saved, but a question will haunt you for the rest of your days. How many other drawers like this exist in museums around the world? This story, though hypothetical, is not an exaggeration. It illustrates a real and powerful phenomenon within the scientific world, a mechanism known as the knowledge filter. To understand this filter, one must understand how science truly operates. Science is not merely a collection of facts. It is a system of theories and models built upon observed evidence. This overarching system is known as a paradigm. Darwin's theory of evolution, the theory of plate tectonics, the Big Bang model. These are all major paradigms that provide the framework through which we interpret our world. These frameworks are incredibly useful, even essential. They allow scientists to share a common language and a foundation upon which to build new knowledge. But they also have a powerful side effect. Anything that does not fit the established paradigm is treated as an anomaly. And the scientific community, like any human institution, has a strong tendency to defend its reigning paradigm. This is where the knowledge filter comes into play. It is not a conscious conspiracy orchestrated by a secret group of men in a darkened room. It is a systemic, almost automatic process that functions through several well-established mechanisms. The first mechanism is peer review. When a scientist wishes to publish an anomalous finding, their paper must be reviewed by other experts in the field. These experts, having built their own careers within the existing paradigm, will naturally hold the anomalous data to a much higher standard of proof than a study that confirms what is already believed. The second mechanism is funding. Research requires money, and funding committees are far more likely to approve projects that promise safe, predictable results within the accepted framework. A grant proposal to study evidence of metallurgy in the Paleozoic era would likely be dismissed out of hand as pseudoscience. The third and perhaps most powerful mechanism is peer pressure and the very human fear of ridicule. No one wants to be branded a crank or a charlatan. Pursuing lines of inquiry that are considered fringe can damage a scientist's reputation and destroy their career prospects. And so, many researchers, when confronted with a piece of data that radically contradicts the norm, may choose the path of least resistance, to simply ignore it. Imagine the body of science as a fisherman's net. The net is woven with a specific mesh size, designed to catch the kinds of fish it expects to find. If a fish is too small, it slips through the holes and goes unnoticed. If some creature appears that is too large, too strange, bearing no resemblance to any known fish, the fisherman might question his own eyes. He might assume it's just a log or a shadow, because the existence of such a creature would challenge his very understanding of the ocean. The knowledge filter is that net. It catches the data that fits and lets the truly paradigm-shattering anomalies get away. The result is that over decades, a vast collection of anomalous findings, forbidden data, has been pushed to the margins of mainstream science. These discoveries are not destroyed, but they are quarantined. They are classified as unexplained, dismissed as hoaxes, and left to languish in museum storage, in the footnotes of old textbooks, and in obscure journals that few people ever read. They exist like ghosts in the grand cathedral of science, occasionally rattling their chains to remind us that the map of the past we hold in our hands may be tragically incomplete. But as history has shown, no filter is perfect. Truth, like water, has a way of finding the cracks. Sometimes, a piece of evidence is too clear, an artifact too compelling, a discovery too earth-shattering to be ignored forever. So, what lies beyond the veil of accepted history? What artifacts have been forgotten in dusty museum drawers? What truths lie buried in the deepest strata of the earth, waiting to be rediscovered? Our journey has just begun. We must now be willing to set aside the familiar map and step into the uncharted territories of the human past. In the next part, we will begin that journey by listening for the first echoes from that distant past, echoes trapped in the oldest and deepest stones of our planet. We begin our journey where we left off, standing at the edge of the known world, looking into the deep abyss of the past. We have established the existence of a powerful force in science, the knowledge filter, a systemic tendency to disregard evidence that threatens our established map of history. This filter is not a conspiracy, but a consequence of human nature, a defense mechanism that protects the comfort of a well-told story. But the filter, for all its strength, is not infallible. It has cracks. Through these cracks, whispers from a forgotten age have managed to slip through. These are not the grand pronouncements of kings or the detailed chronicles of empires. They are quieter, stranger things. They are the ghosts in the geological machine, the artifacts that should not exist. Our search for the hidden history of the human race does not begin in the celebrated ruins of Rome or the majestic pyramids of Giza. It begins in much humbler places, in the yellowed pages of 19th century scientific journals, in the laconic reports of miners and quarrymen, in the accidental discoveries made by ordinary people who stumbled upon the impossible. Our first stop takes us to Dorchester, Massachusetts, in the year 1852. The city was a hub of progress, and work was underway on Meeting House Hill to clear the land. Workers used powerful charges of blasting powder to break apart the immense, ancient rock beds of what is known as Roxbury Pudding Stone. After one particularly powerful explosion, as the dust settled and the workers moved in to clear the debris, they found something extraordinary. Amidst the scattered fragments of rock, they discovered a small bell-shaped vessel that had been blown in two. When the two pieces were fitted back together, they formed a metallic pot, about 4.5 inches high. It was made of a zinc and silver alloy, and the sides were exquisitely inlaid with a floral design in pure silver. The craftsmanship was undeniable, but the astonishing part of the discovery was its origin. According to the sworn affidavits of the workmen, this vessel was not lying among the debris. It was blasted out from within the solid pudding stone rock, which lay 15 feet below the surface. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Geologists date Roxbury puddingstone to the Precambrian era, over 600 million years ago. At that time, according to our universal biological timeline, the most complex life on Earth was little more than sponges and jellyfish drifting in primordial oceans. The very idea of an intelligent being capable of mining or creating alloys and performing delicate silver inlay work in such an ancient time is not just a challenge to our historical narrative. It is a profound impossibility. The discovery was sensational enough to be reported in the June 1852 issue of Scientific American. The editors wrote, with a tone of bewildered wonder, "What we have to say is that the vase was blown out of solid pudding stone, 15 feet below the surface. There is no deception in the matter." Yet, after this initial flicker of interest, the Dorchester pot, as it came to be known, slowly faded from scientific discourse. The knowledge filter began its work. Later, explanations would suggest that the pot was a much more recent creation, perhaps a candlestick holder from the 1700s, that was simply lying on the ground and got mixed in with the debris from the blast. This explanation, of course, directly contradicts the sworn testimony of the men who found it. The men who claimed to have seen it emerge from the heart of the solid rock. The object itself has since vanished, leaving behind only the original report and a lingering, unanswered question. Was its dismissal a sober scientific conclusion? Or was it a convenient act of intellectual housekeeping, tidying away a fact that had no place in our world? If the Dorchester pot was a fleeting whisper from the deep past, our next stop takes us to the high plains of South Africa, to the pyrophyllite mines near the small town of Ottosdal here. The discovery was not a singular, delicate object, but something far more numerous and enigmatic. Over the course of several decades, miners working in the deep Precambrian strata have been finding hundreds of small spheres. These objects, which have come to be known as the Klerksdorp spheres, are an absolute enigma. Many are almost perfectly spherical or disc-shaped. They are composed of a metallic compound, primarily hematite or wollastonite, and are incredibly hard. But their most perplexing feature is the set of fine parallel grooves that run around the equator of many of the spheres. Some have one groove, some have two, and some have three. These grooves are so straight and so perfectly spaced that they appear to be anything but natural. They look, for all the world, like they were machined. And then there is the question of their age. They are found embedded in a mineral deposit of pyrophyllite, a rock layer that was formed by sedimentation. Geologists have dated this layer to an almost incomprehensible 2.8 billion years old. 2.8 billion. At this point in Earth's history, life had not even progressed beyond single-celled organisms like bacteria and algae. There was no oxygen in the atmosphere to speak of. The planet was a hostile, alien world. To suggest that any intelligence existed then, let alone one capable of manufacturing precisely grooved metal spheres, is to leave the realm of history and enter the realm of science fiction. The official geological explanation is that the Klerksdorp spheres are simply limonite concretions. A concretion is a natural phenomenon where minerals, over immense periods of time, precipitate and build up around a nucleus, like a grain of sand, often forming a spherical shape. This explanation accounts for their shape and their presence in the rock, yet it falls short of explaining the most curious details. Natural concretions are rarely perfect spheres, and geologists have never offered a satisfactory explanation for how natural processes could create three perfectly parallel grooves around their equator. Furthermore, some of the spheres have been cut open and are said to contain a strange fibrous material inside, while others are hollow. Some researchers have claimed the objects are balanced with such precision that they would be impossible to replicate even with modern technology. Are the Klerksdorp spheres just a geological curiosity, a trick of nature that we do not yet understand? Or are they something else? Are they the calling cards of an intelligence so ancient, so alien, that our timeline has no place for it? The filter tells us they must be natural, but the objects themselves, silent and symmetrical, continue to pose a defiant question. The pattern does not end in South Africa. The echoes from the deep stone are found all over the world. In 1891, the Morrisonville Times in Illinois reported that a woman, Mrs. S.W. Culp, found a small 8-carat gold chain about 10 inches long after she broke open a lump of coal to put in her scuttle. The two ends of the chain remained firmly embedded in two separate pieces of the coal, while the middle portion looped out. The coal itself came from a local mine, from a scene dated to be approximately 300 million years old. The chain was described as of quaint and antique workmanship. After a brief period of local fame, it, too, vanished from the public record. A similar story unfolds in London, Texas. In the 1930s, a couple on a walk found a strange piece of rock with a piece of wood protruding from it. They took it home and kept it for years. A decade later, their son broke open the rock, revealing what appeared to be an iron hammerhead of a remarkably modern type, attached to the now partially petrified wooden handle. The rock encasing the hammer was not just any rock. It was a limestone concretion dated by geologists to the Cretaceous period. Over 100 million years ago, the time of the dinosaurs, the London hammer, as it is now called, has been fiercely debated. Skeptics argue that mineral concretions can form relatively quickly, in years or decades, not necessarily millennia. They propose that a 19th century miner's hammer was simply dropped and that the limestone-rich water of the region formed a concretion around it. This is a plausible explanation. It satisfies the need for a conventional answer, yet it does not fully explain why the composition of the iron head is said to be unusually pure, with a strange coating that prevents it from rusting. Nor does it silence the fundamental improbability of such a perfect and rapid encapsulation. For every incredible story, there is a mundane explanation. For every eyewitness account, a skeptical voice is ready to offer a more palatable alternative. A vase from a recent time period caught in a blast, natural mineral concretions, a modern object that fell into a crack. The knowledge filter is remarkably efficient at its job, sanding down the sharp edges of anomalous data until they fit smoothly into the established narrative. The evidence is always just circumstantial enough. The objects always seem to disappear just before they can be properly studied. The stories are always just old enough to be dismissed as folklore. But the sheer volume of these accounts begins to paint a picture. Taken in isolation, each one can be explained away. But viewed together, they form a persistent and unsettling pattern. They are echoes in the deep stone, whispers of craftsmanship and intelligence in ages where there should have been only silence. Objects, however, no matter how strange, can be dismissed. They are silent witnesses, unable to speak for themselves. Their stories are told by their finders, and those stories can be questioned. What happens, however, when the evidence from the deep past is not of tools, but of their makers? What happens when we find not just the artifacts of ancient hands, but the very footprints of ancient feet, pressed into stone that is older than the oldest mountains? Our journey into the forbidden history of our world has just passed its first marker. The silent objects have posed their questions. Now we must venture further to seek out the ghosts of those who may have left them behind. In our last chapter, we listened for echoes in the deep stone. We explored the unsettling mystery of objects, a delicate vase, precisely grooved spheres, an iron hammerall found locked away in geological strata that were formed long before the first human was thought to have walked the earth. These artifacts are whispers from an impossible past, but they are, in the end, just objects. Their stories are ambiguous, their origins can be debated, and the knowledge filter is adept at explaining them away as hoaxes, misinterpretations, or strange tricks of nature. They are circumstantial evidence. At best, to build a stronger case for a lost chapter of our history, we must search for something more direct, more personal. We must move beyond the evidence of what they made and search for evidence of who they were. We must go in search of the makers themselves. Our journey now takes us from the artifacts of ancient hands to the indelible impressions of ancient feet, etched directly into the bedrock of our planet. Our first and most important stop is a quiet riverbed in Glen Rose, Texas. The Paluxy River is, by all official accounts, world famous for one thing: some of the clearest, most perfectly preserved dinosaur tracks on the entire planet. Here, in the creamy limestone of the river floor, one can walk alongside the trails of giant sauropods and three-toed theropods that passed this way during the Cretaceous period, some 110 million years ago. It is a humbling window into a lost world, but beginning in the early 1900s, locals began noticing other tracks, often in the very same rock layers that were not reptilian. These tracks were different. They were elongated, with a clear impression of a heel at the back and a splay of 5 distinct toes at the front. To the untrained eye, and indeed to many who have studied them since, they looked impossibly, undeniably human. Thus began one of the most heated and enduring controversies in the history of paleontology. For decades, a fierce debate has raged over the Glen Rose footprints. On one side, creationists and alternative researchers have held them up as irrefutable proof that humanity and dinosaurs coexisted, shattering the official evolutionary timeline. On the other side, the scientific establishment has mounted a vigorous and sustained campaign to debunk them. The mainstream scientific explanation has taken several forms over the years. The first and most common is that the tracks are simply misidentified dinosaur prints. Scientists suggest they are the tracks of a bipedal dinosaur, where erosion and mudslump have obscured the claw marks and made the three-toed impression look more like a single, elongated human foot. Another explanation is that they are clever carvings made by locals during the Great Depression to sell as curiosities to tourists. And it is true, some tracks were proven to be just that, a fact that has been used to cast doubt on the authenticity of all the others. Finally, some are dismissed as nothing more than random erosional patterns in the limestone, a form of geological pareidolia, where the mind sees a familiar pattern in a random shape. These explanations are plausible, and they serve to protect the established paradigm. But for those who have walked the riverbed themselves, they do not always satisfy. The details of the tracks themselves are often what keep the controversy alive. In some of the clearest examples, one can see what appears to be the subtle impression of a human foot's arch. One can see the deeper indentation of the heel and the distinct push-off mark of the big toe, exactly as a human foot would leave when walking through soft mud. Perhaps most compelling were the trails. The tracks did not appear in isolation. They formed clear left-right patterns with consistent stride lengths and a natural gait. The most famous of these was the Taylor Trail, a long series of prints which appeared to show a human trail intersecting directly with a dinosaur trail. To many, this was the smoking gun. While some of the individual prints have since been contested or have eroded away, the original photographs and casts continue to fuel the debate. The act of proving some tracks were hoaxes served as a convenient way for the knowledge filter to dismiss the entire site, effectively poisoning the well for any serious, unbiased investigation into the more compelling prints that remain. Today, the scientific consensus is that there are no human tracks at Glenrose, but the limestone bed of the Paluxy River doesn't read scientific journals. It simply holds what it has held for millions of years, a set of impressions that continue to challenge what we believe to be true. The mystery of anomalous footprints is not confined to Texas. In 1968, an amateur rock and fossil hunter named William J. Meister was searching for trilobite fossils in Antelope Spring, Utah. As he hammered open a slab of shale, the rock split apart like a book, revealing something that made him stop in his tracks. There, on one of the newly exposed surfaces, was what appeared to be the print of a sandal. The shape was unmistakable, a clear outline of the right side of a shoe, about 10 inches long, with the heel indented more deeply than the sole. But the most astonishing part of the discovery was what lay crushed within the print. Lying directly in the heel impression were the fossilized remains of 2 small trilobites. The implication was staggering. Trilobites are an index fossil for the Paleozoic era. They dominated the oceans but went extinct over 250 million years ago, long before the dinosaurs even appeared. To find a sandal print implying not just a human, but a human wearing shoes crushing a trilobite would be akin to finding a jet engine in the tomb of a pharaoh. It would not just rewrite our history, it would tear the book to shreds. The official explanation, once again, relies on natural phenomena. Geologists argue that the Meister print is simply a coincidence, a natural fracture pattern in the shale where a slab of rock has flaked off in a shape that fortuitously resembles a sandal. The presence of the crushed trilobites, they say, is just that, a coincidence. But for those who look at the print, at the smooth, curved outline where the foot would have pressed, at the clear indentation of the heel, the word coincidence can begin to feel like an insufficient answer. How many coincidences? How many strange erosional patterns? How many misidentified tracks must we accept before we are allowed to ask the forbidden question? What if they are exactly what they appear to be? Footprints, however convincing, are still just traces. They are the ghosts of a presence. But if there were footprints, there must have been people. What, then, of their bodies? What of their bones? The search for this ultimate proof takes us to the 19th century. During the frantic days of the California gold rush, as miners burrowed deep into the sides of mountains, like Table Mountain in Tuolumne County, they were not just digging for gold. They were digging into the past. Deep below the surface, under thick, solid layers of volcanic lava, they began to find things that should not have been there. They found stone spearheads, mortar and pestles. And most importantly, they found human bones and skulls. These were not discoveries made at the surface. They were found in deep mine shafts, in gravel beds that were sealed off by the ancient lava flows. Geologists of the time dated these gold-bearing gravels to be anywhere from 33 to 55 million years old. The bones were not fossilized. They were modern in appearance, belonging to anatomically modern Homo sapiens. These discoveries were not ignored. They were taken very seriously. They were meticulously documented by Dr. Josiah Whitney, the state geologist of California at the time. He compiled the evidence into a massive volume, The Auriferous Gravels of the Sierra Nevada of California. Published by Harvard University in 1880, Whitney, a respected scientist, concluded that the evidence was undeniable. A human population had existed in North America in the distant Eocene epoch, millions of years before humanity was supposed to have evolved in Africa. The most famous of these discoveries was the Calaveras skull, a human skull unearthed from deep within a mine shaft in 1866. For a time, it was a world-famous testament to the antiquity of humankind in America. But the paradigm was already shifting. The story of human evolution was being solidified, and its timeline had no room for 50-million-year-old Californians. The knowledge filter activated with decisive force. Scientists from the East Coast, particularly from the influential Smithsonian Institution, launched a campaign to discredit Whitney and his findings. The Calaveras skull was eventually declared to be a hoaxer, recent Native American skull that had been planted in the mine as a prank. And just as with the Paluxy tracks, this single, plausible debunking was used as a weapon to discredit the entire collection of evidence. The dozens of other bone fragments and hundreds of artifacts found by different miners in different locations over many years were all swept under the rug, tainted by the same brush of fraud. Whitney's monumental work was relegated to the dusty back shelves of university libraries, a cautionary tale for any scientist who dared to present evidence that strayed too far from the accepted path. So here we stand. We have followed the trail from objects to footprints, and from footprints to the very bones of those who made them. At every step, we have seen compelling evidence of a human presence in an impossibly ancient past. And at every step, we have seen the powerful mechanisms of the knowledge filter at work, dismissing, explaining away, and ultimately burying the evidence it could not accommodate. The footprints and skeletons hint at something else as well. Many of the tracks are larger than those of a modern human. Many of the skeletons were reported to be of unusual size. These discoveries resonate with a deep and universal memory found in almost every culture on Earth, the myth of a time when giants walked the earth. The evidence of their presence is one thing. But what of their creations? If people, giant or otherwise, walked this planet for millions of years, they would not have been idle. They would have observed the stars. They would have harnessed the forces of nature. They would have built. They would have created. In the next part of our journey, we will shift our search from the traces of their bodies to the legacy of their minds. For the epic ruins and impossible technologies of a dawn civilization that our history has entirely forgotten. In our journey so far, we have walked a path that diverges sharply from the maps of conventional history. We began by acknowledging the powerful knowledge filter, the invisible force that protects our established narrative of the past. Then, we examined the evidence that has slipped through its cracks, anomalous artifacts locked in ancient stone, and the fossilized footprints of beings who walked the earth in ages ruled by dinosaurs and trilobites. We even uncovered the buried skeletal remains of modern humans from a time millions of years before they were supposed to exist. We have established a persistent, unsettling pattern of a human presence stretching back into an impossibly deep antiquity. But this raises a profound and obvious question. If people were on this planet for millions of years, what did they do? Where are their cities? Where are their monuments? Where is the tangible legacy of their long existence? An intelligence capable of crafting a delicate vase or a golden chain would not remain idle for eons. They would have built, they would have engineered, they would have left their mark upon the world. To find that mark, we must now lift our gaze from the soil and look towards the great stone monuments that litter our planet. We are told these are the works of emerging Bronze Age or Neolithic cultures, built with simple tools and immense manual labor. But some of these ruins whisper a different story. They are not the legacy of primitive beginners, but the shattered remains of a masterful and perhaps global civilization. Our search for this lost dawn now takes us to two of the most enigmatic sites on Earth, places where the stones themselves cry out with evidence of impossible engineering. Our first destination is the high, desolate Altiplano of Bolivia, nearly 13,000 feet above sea level. Here, in the thin, cold air, lies a ruin so strange, so precise, that it defies all conventional explanation. It is called Puma Punku. The name means the door of the puma. What remains today is not a majestic, standing temple, but a sprawling field of colossal stone blocks, toppled and scattered across the landscape as if a divine child had thrown down his building blocks in a fit of anger. The official story is that Puma Punku was built by the Tiwanaku civilization, a pre-Incan culture, somewhere around 500 to 1000. We are told, these people, with their simple bronze chisels and stone hammers, managed to quarry, transport, and assemble this incredible complex. But the moment you look closely at the stones themselves, this story begins to unravel. The first impossibility is the material. The blocks are made of red sandstone and a much harder stone, grey andesite and diorite. On the Mohs scale of hardness, diorite is an incredibly dense and brittle stone, rating close to an 8, not far behind diamond at a 10. To shape it requires something harder than the stone itself. The idea that Bronze Age tools could carve this material with anything more than the most superficial scratches is deeply problematic. But the true mystery of Puma Punku lies not just in the material, but in the precision of the workmanship. The cuts are perfectly straight, the surfaces are polished to a glass-like smoothness, and the angles are flawlessly executed. There are interior corners that are so sharp and so perfectly right-angled that they appear to have been machined. In many places where blocks were meant to join, the fit is so perfect that not even a razor blade can be inserted between them. Most famously, there are the H blocks. These are massive, multi-ton blocks of andesite, all carved into a complex shape featuring multiple planes and interior angles, and they are all virtually identical. They do not look like the work of artisans carving individual stones. They look like they were mass-produced, cast from a mold, or cut by a machine of unbelievable precision. Many of the blocks feature complex interlocking designs and small holes, drilled in intricate patterns, suggesting they were part of a much larger, interlocking structure, perhaps designed to be earthquake-proof. We are asked to believe that a civilization without a written language, without the wheel, and with only the most rudimentary tools, created a structure that would challenge the most advanced stoneworking specialists of today. Can a bronze chisel cut a perfectly straight, 3-foot-long groove into diorite? Can stone pounders create surfaces that are flat to within fractions of a millimeter? Puma Punku does not look like the product of a Bronze Age culture. It looks like the ruins of a factory. The stones are not just building blocks. They are components, manufactured with a precision that speaks of a lost science of engineering. If Puma Punku is a testament to impossible precision, our next destination, halfway across the world in the fertile Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, is a testament to impossible scale. Here stands the ancient site of Baalbek. Today, it is famous for the magnificent Roman temples of Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus that dominate the landscape. But the true mystery of Baalbek lies beneath the Roman ruins. The Romans, for all their engineering genius, built their grandest temple on top of a pre-existing platform. A foundation so colossal that it makes their own impressive work seem small by comparison. The western retaining wall of this foundation platform contains the three most famous megaliths in the world, the trilithon. These are three rectangular blocks of limestone, so enormous that they beg a belief. Each one is estimated to weigh over 800 tons. They were quarried, somehow transported over a mile, and then lifted more than 20 feet into the air to be placed with perfect precision into the wall. To put 800 tons into perspective, it is the equivalent of about 150 large elephants, or 2 fully loaded Boeing 747 jets. And this is not even the limit of this ancient culture's abilities. A short distance away, in the original quarry, lies an even larger stone, a monolith known as the Hajar al-Hibla, or the stone of the pregnant woman. It lies there still, partially buried, a testament to an abandoned project of unimaginable ambition. It is estimated to weigh over 1,200 tons. Recently, an even larger block, estimated at 1,650 tons, was discovered nearby. The Romans were brilliant engineers, and they were meticulous record keepers. Yet, in all of their extensive writings, there is not a single mention of them quarrying, moving, or lifting stones of this magnitude. The scale of the Baalbek foundation is utterly alien to known Roman construction methods. It raises a profound question. Did the Romans simply find this ancient platform of the gods and decide to build their own temple on top of it, attributing the work to a forgotten race of giants? Who were the original builders of this platform? And what kind of technology could they have possibly possessed to manipulate such impossible weights with such apparent ease? The legacy of this lost dawn may not only be in stone, but also in knowledge fragments of a forgotten science passed down through the ages in the form of enigmatic maps and legends. In 1929, a discovery was made in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey. It was a map drawn on gazelle skin, dated to the year 1513. It was created by a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis. What was remarkable about this map was its annotation, in which Piri Reis stated that he had compiled it from numerous, much older source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great and beyond. The map is startlingly accurate in its depiction of the coastlines of Western Europe, North Africa, and the coast of Brazil. But its most controversial feature is what it shows in the far south. It appears to depict the northern coast of Antarctica. This is impossible for several reasons. First, Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, over 300 years after the map was made. Second, and more astonishingly, the coastline shown on the map appears to be free of ice. The last time the Queen Maudland coast of Antarctica was in an ice-free state was, according to mainstream geology, at least 6,000 years ago, and possibly much longer. How could ancient cartographers have known the precise geography of a continent that was not yet discovered? And how could they have mapped its coastline as it was before it was covered by thousands of feet of ice? The Piri Reis map suggests that one of its ancient source maps was created by a seafaring civilization with a sophisticated knowledge of global geography. At a time in the distant past when the world looked very different than it does today, this idea of a forgotten high technology is echoed in the ancient epic texts of India, such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. These texts describe, in vivid detail, flying craft known as Vimanas. They are not described as mythical birds or chariots of the gods, but as structured vehicles capable of flying at great speeds, maneuvering through the air and carrying powerful weapons. Are these simply the products of a rich poetic imagination? Or are they the fading cultural memories of a real technology, a distorted echo from a civilization that had mastered the skies long before our own? We are now faced with a stunning convergence of evidence. We see impossible precision in the machine-like ruins of Puma Punku. We see impossible scale in the titanic foundations of Baalbek, and we see impossible knowledge in the charts of ancient sea kings and the legends of flying craft. When viewed together, these disparate pieces of evidence begin to form a coherent picture. They point to the existence of a highly advanced, perhaps global, civilization in our remote past. A civilization that possessed a form of engineering and a depth of scientific knowledge that in some ways may have rivaled or even surpassed our own. But this conclusion leads to the most profound question of all. If such a civilization, or perhaps several, truly existed, what happened to them? Why is there no official record of their existence? Why are we left with only shattered ruins, enigmatic maps, and fragmented memories? Why did their dawn end so completely? To answer that question, we must look at the biggest picture of all. We must look to the great, recurring cycles of the earth itself and to the heavens above. In our final part, we will explore the grand unifying theory that could explain everything we have seen, the theory of a great cycle of destruction and rebirth, and what its terrifying implications might be for the future of our own civilization. We have traveled a long and strange road together, far from the comfortable highways of conventional history. Our journey began with a simple question: what if the story of our past is incomplete? To answer it, we first had to understand the powerful knowledge filter, the systemic bias that protects our established timeline from inconvenient truths. Then, armed with this understanding, we ventured into the forbidden territories of science. We listened for the faint, metallic echoes of craftsmanship from within stones that were billions of years old. We walked in the footprints of beings who shared the earth with dinosaurs and trilobites, and we uncovered the bones of modern humans from epochs long before our own. From there, we lifted our gaze to the legacy of their works. We stood in awe before the impossible precision of Puma Punku, where stones were seemingly machined by a lost technology. We were humbled by the impossible scale of Baalbek, where titans erected a foundation that even the great Roman Empire could not equal. We glimpsed their forgotten wisdom in the lines of ancient maps that charted lands unknown, and in the epic poems that remembered flying machines. At every turn, the evidence has pointed toward the same startling conclusion, that in the deep past, a highly advanced, sophisticated, and perhaps global civilization existed on this planet. This brings us to the ultimate question, the final mystery that looms over all the others. If this is true, if a great civilization or perhaps a series of them rose and fell in the ages before our own, what happened to them? Why is there no official record? Why was their destruction so absolute that their very existence has been scrubbed from the memory of the world, leaving behind only these enigmatic ghosts in the stone? The answer may be as simple as it is terrifying. The history of humanity on this planet is not a straight line of progress. It is a circle, or rather, it is a series of repeating cycles of creation and destruction. The unifying theory that could explain everything we have seen is the theory of a great cycle. Imagine this: a civilization rises. Over thousands of years, it develops sciences, technologies, and a consciousness that may, in some ways, be far different from our own. It masters engineering, astronomy, and perhaps even the fundamental forces of the universe. It builds a global network. And then, in a geological instant, it is all wiped away. A global cataclysm of unimaginable force scours the surface of the planet, shattering cities, sinking continents, and vaporizing entire populations. Only a handful of survivors remain, scattered across a ruined world. They are thrown back into a new Stone Age, their advanced knowledge shattered and lost. All they retain are the fragmented, traumatic memories of the world that was. They remember a golden age. They remember a time when gods walked among them, and they remember the terrifying cataclysm that ended it all. These memories, passed down orally from generation to generation, become distorted over time. They become the myths and legends that we know today. The near-universal story of a great flood that destroyed the world is not a local legend. It is the collective human memory of the end of the last cycle. The story of an advanced civilization like Atlantis, which sank beneath the waves because of its hubris, is not a fable. It is a history. This theory of a cyclical cataclysm elegantly solves every puzzle we have encountered. The impossible ruins of Puma, Punku, and Baalbek are not the works of primitive peoples. They are the shattered earthquake-proof foundations of the antediluvian world, the few structures strong enough to survive the devastation. The impossible knowledge of the Piri Reis map is not a coincidence. It is a surviving document from the last cycle's global database of knowledge, a map from a time before the ice caps claimed Antarctica. The Vimanas of ancient India are not poetic fantasies. They are the fading memory of that cycle's mastery of flight. And what of the even older artifacts? The footprints and skeletons from millions of years ago. They are the traces of previous cycles. They are the legacies of civilizations so ancient that not even myths of them remain, their worlds almost entirely erased by eons of geological change, their faint whispers only occasionally found by a lucky miner's pickaxe or a geologist's hammer. But what could be the engine of such a recurring destruction? The myths themselves give us clues. They speak of fire from the heavens, of the sky falling, of the world turning over. In recent years, a growing number of mainstream scientists have begun to find evidence for just such events. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, for example, posits that one or more cometary fragments struck the Earth around 12,800 years ago, at the same time Plato's Atlantis was said to have vanished. Such an impact would have caused the ice caps to flash melt, triggering global floods of biblical proportions, and plunging the world into a 1,000-year-long winter. Other theories look to the sun, suggesting that our star periodically erupts in a superflare or a micronova that could scorch the surface of the Earth, and still others look to the Earth itself, pointing to evidence that the planet's magnetic poles periodically shift, or that the entire crust can become unstable and displace, causing the whole world to lurch in a cataclysm of unimaginable earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and 1,000-foot-high tsunamis. The exact mechanism is perhaps less important than the overwhelming conclusion. Our planet is not the stable, gentle cradle we believe it to be. It is a dynamic and violent system with a built-in reset button, and it appears that this reset button has been pushed time and time again. If this is true, it changes everything we think we know about ourselves. Our modern civilization is not the pinnacle of human achievement, the apex of a long, slow climb from the cave. We are, instead, the children of the latest spring. We are an amnesiac culture, born from the ashes of a forgotten winter, who have finally managed to relearn some of the science and technology that our ancestors once knew. The survivors of the last cataclysm left us a warning, encoded in their myths and sacred stories. They told us that the world before them was destroyed because of its arrogance, its wars, its spiritual decay, and its disrespect for the cosmic order. They warned us not to repeat their mistakes, and so we must end our journey here by turning the lens from the distant past to the immediate present. We look at our own global civilization. We see our incredible technological power. We see our ability to communicate instantly across the planet. We see our rockets reaching for the stars. And we also see our world teetering on the brink, beset by endless conflicts, by ecological devastation, and by a spiritual emptiness that haunts our modern age. We see a civilization that is brilliant, powerful, and perhaps profoundly unwise. We have looked back into the abyss of time and seen the ghosts of worlds that came before. We have seen the evidence that we are not the first. The question now, the final and most important question, is whether we will be the last. When the great wheel of time inevitably turns and the next cycle grinds onward, what legacy will our civilization leave behind for the few who may survive? Will it be a library of wisdom, a warning of hope, or will it be nothing more than a handful of shattered ruins, the faint echo of a beautiful song that was forgotten, and the fading memory of a dawn that was lost forever in the twilight of the gods? And so, our story for tonight comes to a close, but the questions it leaves behind are, perhaps, just beginning. History, after all, is not a collection of settled answers, but a vast ocean of mysteries still waiting to be explored. If this story has brought you a moment of wonder and relaxation, a simple like is a quiet but deeply appreciated encouragement. And if you wish to join our future journeys into the lands of the forgotten, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. What are your thoughts on what we have uncovered? Which idea lingers most in your mind? Please share your reflections in the comments below. I truly enjoy reading them. Thank you for spending your time with the Bedtime Historian. May your sleep be peaceful, and may your dreams be filled with the echoes of history. Until we meet again.